to the Professional, your regular, and today we have an issue of national interest. This is one issue that has affected the overall development of our country's economy, and that is violence. From north to west, east to south, we have skirmishes here and there. If it's not kidnapping here, it's armed robbery there. As if that was not enough, we are now talking about explosions, bombs here and there across the country. And we say it is alien to our culture, but at the same time, we believe there is a reason behind all this. How do we get this problem solved? Today we shall be looking at the impact of all this violence in the overall development of our economy, with emphasis on the tourism sector of the economy. And we shall be having one of our regular guests, the Managing Director, Chief Executive of Nanette Hotels Limited. But the interview segment comes back after this time out. Please stay. You're still watching the show HR to the Professional. Like I mentioned to you in my introduction, today we are taking a look at the effect or impact of the persistent violence across the country to the development of both tourism and, of course, our overall economy. And like I mentioned also today on the show, we have a key player in the tourism industry, the Managing Director, Chief Executive, Nanette Hotels Limited. Once again, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Akpabio.
Thank you, Martins.
All right. Now, the incessant violence across the country. In the first instance, what's your opinion about that?
Well, it's sad. Violence of any nature is not good for any country. Violence is a negative aspect of our lives, and violence affects not just tourism. It affects our own personal security, it affects investments in Nigeria, and it affects very, very badly our international image. And so the violence we had from the election period was something that has been very unwelcomed. I wouldn't know what to say, but I would like to start by saying that to my knowledge, and I would like to say this as diplomatically as possible, I feel pre the election period, enough was not done to curtail the kind of violence we had. I do believe we have agencies in the government, maybe like the NOA, the INEC itself, Ministry of Information. I think they should have done and played a greater role in anticipating this kind of violence and preventing the occurrence of this kind of violence. So I think for future elections, people's orientation, people's understanding of what elections are all about should have been at the forefront of these agencies of government's job in making sure people know that the violence was not really necessary.
All right, you talked about elections, but what about the issue of the Boko Haram? I mean, this has been there even before the coming of the elections, even before we started planning elections. There had been some bombings across some parts of Borno State. What do you have to say about that? Do you feel there's a link between the elections and what's going on in Borno State, for instance?
On a factual, on a personal note, I would like to say that violence like the Boko Haram you mentioned are symptoms of very severe problems in our society. These problems come from politics, they come from poor governance, and they come from gross frustration and dissatisfaction and discontent within the majority of Nigerians.
Yes.
So the aspect that it may have been there before the elections, it became worse after the elections. It's just a gradual build-up of these issues. And like many persons have said, it has political undertones. And many times, of course, people are easily separated in terms of religious divides.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it goes beyond religion, as I've said. So we must prevent these things coming. And one of the ways of preventing these things coming is that when you look at an empty glass, the empty glass is full of air.
Yeah.
But if you fill it with water, water takes the place of air.
Yeah.
So you can't have water and air filling a glass. And what the Nigerian government needs to do is to fill our glasses with water. In filling the glasses with water, the water we are looking for are jobs, good governance, the security you're talking about, transportation, electricity supply, employment especially. If persons who are prone to creating this kind of issues are engaged in very taxing and rewarding jobs, they will not have time to do some of the things that have affected us. So I think it's something that we need to really look at in its totality.
Okay, thank you very much. I think what I could get from what you're saying is we need to strike a balance. I'm taking it from your analysis of water and air. We know that even the water contains air, is hydrogen and oxygen for those who did sciences. So we need both oxygen and hydrogen to strike a balance, rather than just have an oxygen and then there is no hydrogen. It's all right. The violence in itself is alien to our culture. No matter how you look at it, be it religious, be it ethnic, however you look at it, violence is alien to our culture. Now, do we attribute what is going on to the spate of violence across the world, because there has been issues of terrorism that has become a global discourse at the moment? Even countries where you never heard things like that are beginning to experience the same thing. And in October of 2010, we witnessed a bomb blast, which was like what triggered what we are witnessing. In the past, there had been some violence, yes, shooting, people using axes and cutlasses and all that. But now we've taken it to the next level. Do you see this just as discontent, or do you think we are, as it were, beginning to borrow some of those negative traits, that we have in other crimes?
What I would like to say is that from where I'm standing, I don't think that there is really any country in this world that you will say loves violence.
Okay.
I wouldn't say there is any country that it is their nature to be violent. But what I will agree with you is that countries grow to become regarded as violent in nature. And just like you mentioned of recent times, you can maybe say that, for instance, Syria is becoming a very violent, or is a violent society as of today.
Yeah.
You can say the same of Yemen. Of course, we started with Egypt, Tunisia, and all of them. But if you really look at their history, prior to what is happening, they were not violent.
Okay.
Then when you look at violence as a specific aspect, violence is a tool for change. It's not a positive tool, but it's just like darkness before light. And in the cases of these Arabic countries that we mentioned, they heralded a change in their democratic and governmental setup. So when you come to Nigeria, again, Nigeria is like any other country. We have been hitherto a mostly peaceful nation. But we're also affected, as you rightly said, by what happens outside. We have too many technological means of getting information, of seeing what happens to other parts, in other parts of the world, and so on and so forth. So there is no country in today's global reckoning that is totally obscure from what happens in Afghanistan. It has an effect in Nigeria. What happens in Nigeria has effect in Argentina, and so on and so forth. So these things, yeah, definitely will affect us. And I wouldn't say that we should be regarded as of now as a violent society. It's just that we are undergoing what I pray is a temporary spate of violent reactions. And these violent reactions have been occurring in so many other parts of the world. You have the Irish Republican Army in Britain. You have those in Italy. You have had in Spain. You have had in virtually all parts of the country. Even recently, we had the one in Norway, which was one of the world's most peaceful countries. So these are not alien to us. I keep telling people, maybe I'm a die-hard optimist. These two will pass. But we need to find out why this is happening, get the right solutions to stop them reoccurring, and then in the near future, we will also be saying, oh, we had a time when this used to happen. So I'm sure that time will come. I don't think we are going to become a perpetually violent society. Neither are we going to have a higher level of violence,
yes,
and so on. Yes, I pray not.
No, we don't pray for that. Well, at this moment, we must take a break. We still have the Managing Director, Chief Executive of Nanette Hotels Limited, here with us, talking about the effect of violence on the overall economic development of our dear nation. We'll be back.
Hotels Limited is the best place you can be. Anytime, any day, our service is the best. Anytime, any day, think of the best, take Nanette. Nanette Hotels Limited, superior hospitality services.
Welcome back. You're still watching A Chat to the Professional. Before we went on break, my guest has tried to analyze, in his understanding, some of the causes of the seemingly persistent violence across the country, especially since after the 2010 general elections. Right now, we're going to be getting into looking specifically at the impact of this spate of violence across the country on overall economic development. I know that you are into tourism. You run a couple of hotels across the country. What has been the level of impact of this violence on your business, for instance?
The impact has been exceptionally high for us. It's been high because we run hotels virtually at the centers of this violence. In the first place, we had quite a lot of problems in Kaduna, and we run a few hotels in Kaduna. And right from the election month itself, which was in April, so April was not good, and then the aftermath of the election was felt negatively, especially in Kaduna and some other places in the month of May. So again, we had reductions in our incomes in these places that ran from the 100% we normally have to about 30%. And then there was a sustained level of violence, and which led to very long curfews. We've never had curfews that have lasted for about 4 months. And this was the case we experienced in Kaduna town in particular. Every day you wake up and you see headlines screaming on all newspapers that yesterday something happened, a bomb was somewhere in the market, in the drinking places, on the roads, and so on and so forth. These things are unfortunately having a very immediate negative effect on our businesses. They will also have a medium to long term negative effect because it takes time for people to forget bad things.
Yeah.
In fact, it's easier to forget good things quickly, but it does take time to forget bad things. And most of these towns which have experienced violence of one sort or the other within the last 6 months, it will take time for people to have the confidence to go there to do business. We have had cancellations of group bookings. We've had cancellations of major events in all these towns that I mentioned. So the effects have a chain reaction, and most of the chain reaction effects are really not very positive.
Okay. As we wind up, what would be your advice to the government of the day, especially some of these states where, like you mentioned, in Kaduna and, for instance, Maiduguri as well? What would be your advice to the chief executives of those states? Do you think imposing curfew alone is enough to take care of this situation?
Imposing curfew is not enough, and many times, as far as I am personally concerned, they don't tend to even resolve the issue. For the curfews always have a terminal period, and what people do is wait. If they want to operate during the time that curfews are imposed, they wait until curfews are taken off and then they go about. So it doesn't really help in the long run. Rather, it causes greater uncertainty, discomfort for the majority of persons resident there who have no idea or business or had no inclination in the violence that was perpetuated, which is normally done by a very, very tiny percentage of the populace. So what I feel the government should do is that, first and foremost, at the federal and state levels, and even the local government, we have security votes. A lot of these votes should be also used to educate their populace on the futility of violence. Number two, we should also have governors that engage people in their states for positive, on positive aspects. I'll give the example of, let us say, Lagos State. Lagos State at one time was besieged by area boys. If you go to any ceremony in those days in Lagos, you will nearly be mobbed. And what the current governor Fashola did was to engage them in responsible jobs, give and sustain them in useful employment. So I believe that, I still say it, state governments must be interested in the welfare of their people, in the job creation in their states. Look, I'm in the hospitality industry. Look at hotels. We have hotels that were built, were 85% completed 15 years ago. Many state governors have come to those states. They see a building that their own state has spent over ₦1 billion. That building could employ 200 to 300 persons, and there is no incentive on their part to finish these buildings and create employment. So there are too many unfinished projects projects that will generate employment. Can we have a state governor that tells you, look, in my state I have 4 million people. Out of these 4 million people, 1,500,000 are unemployed. Now, in the month of January, I want to create maybe jobs for 20,000 people. In the month of February, I've reduced employment by this amount. If you're an American president, you are judged by how many jobs you are creating, by how much the economy is growing, and so on and so forth. So I believe that it is also becoming very, very difficult and becoming nearly impossible to access funds to develop our businesses. So those in authority that should make funds available for businesses to survive need to really get their act together. The demand for collateral, demand for paperwork, demand for security is becoming exaggerated, and this again is leading to reduction of new businesses, reduction in creation of employment, and sometimes you have all these upheavals in the society.
Anyway, the issues of assessing funds, that will probably leave for another day. Today we are simply looking at the impact of violence on the overall economic development of our dear country, Nigeria. And we are hoping that maybe soon we'll be able to get the CBN governor on this show to come and address some of those issues, because they are actually key points. But like I said, is a topic for another day. Well, I'm sure you must have found it as refreshing as I have, having the Managing Director, Chief Executive, Nanette Hotels Limited, in Akpabio. He's been on this show a couple of times, and it's always a delight, as usual, the professional handshake.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we wish you well. We are hoping that the government of the day, as a matter of urgency, will be able to get these issues resolved. We are also aware that the federal government has stepped in to quell some of these skirmishes across the country, but we are also appealing to Nigerians to please eschew violence. It cannot lead us anywhere. Dialogue, they say, is the answer, and on this program that's what we preach, while encouraging the young ones to think positive. Go to school to study a course you want to practice when you leave school. Don't just study a course for the glamour that goes with the profession. Do it because you have passion for it. And I'm sure if we do more of this, the violence we are witnessing across the country will drastically reduce. We have a lot of unemployable graduates in Nigeria. So it's not just enough to cry that there's unemployment. We have the multinationals going back home to bring their own people because, according to them, they are unable to find enough professionals within the country to fit into those positions. But what do? Do they invest in researches? Do they invest in training some of our people? These are some of the issues that I think even the legislature has to look at and see how we can ensure that a percentage of gross earnings of organizations are dedicated to core researches, to training of professionals that will fill certain positions that up till now we still go abroad to import when our own people are here without employment. Well, that will be all for the interview segment. I will see you on the other side to wrap up the show. Please stay. Well, like I said a while ago, it's unfortunate that we have to witness what we are going through at the moment. But this is a clarion call to everyone, individuals, corporate organizations, and the government of the day. Let us all rise up and say no to the spate of violence across the country. Let the corporate organizations also be proactive. The multinationals in particular. When you sit back and you think you are saving for your children and great-grandchildren, and you are exporting, if you like, not just our natural resources, but indeed all the money that you make in the country you send back to your own country. Do not forget that someday, like we've witnessed in the case of some of the oil companies, the issues of vandalization, that would stop if we begin to invest in human capital. let us vote a substantial amount of the profit we make doing business in Nigeria in human capital development. Let us invest in researches. Let us ensure that people go into school to study courses they want to practice when they leave school. Let us have a situation where people get into entertainment, for instance, as I've been saying on this show, because they have passion and because they have the knowledge of what it takes to be an entertainer. Let us not do it because there is money in the industry. It's not just enough for you to go in search of the so-called golden fleece abroad when you have nothing to offer. You've got to be grounded in what you do, and only then will you be respected wherever you find yourself. So this is the much we can take on the show today, Chat to the Professional. But remember, we have our campaign that is ongoing, and that is the mobilization for 300 television sets for a start, which we intend to distribute by November this year to secondary schools with boarding facilities. And what we are doing is to make sure that we catch them young. These young lads who are in secondary schools, who when they are at home watch only but entertainment, should be encouraged to watch some educational and research-based programs on television so that they can decide well ahead of time what they want to become in future. And that's what we are trying to do. So till then, I remain Martin Sobu saying stay blessed.